Hello everyone, Ailuromage the Magic History Cat here, and the last video I made on this topic about the Final Fantasy XIV Paladin was well received, so I figured I'd talk about White Mage since it also has plenty of interesting terms relative to Christianity. Now, while I just started playing Paladin for the first time maybe a couple of months ago, I have played White Mage since the beginning, but that was before I did content creation of any kind, and I also don't really play White Mage anymore. However, I figured it would be fun to revisit the names of the abilities since I did talk about Paladin. Similarly to my last video, I will just be covering the unique ones that stand out, and also since this is talking about White Mage, pretty much every ability just heals you, so you're going to hear that a lot. In any case, let's just get right into it. First to start with is Benediction. In-game, it heals a party member to full health instantly. Generally speaking, a benediction is a blessing bestowed through prayer. In Roman Catholicism, there is what's called the benediction of the Blessed Sacrament. There are many specific details here, but overall, the Blessed Sacrament is the Eucharist, which is the third of the 7 sacraments in Catholicism. The Blessed Sacrament is exposed on the monstrance on the altar, the faithful are blessed, and this is accompanied by songs and prayer. The Eucharist is the most important sacrament in Catholicism, and it is considered a blessing of utmost importance to receive the body and blood of Christ. In relation to the game, this is the most powerful healing ability in the game, so I think this name is rather fitting for its effect. And now, I know I said I'd go in order, but I'm going to cover these 3 abilities together because they share the term Afflatus, and they are also the abilities that interact with the Lily system the White Mage has. Lilies in-game are essentially tokens to use special healing abilities, and they recover over time. Lilies in Christianity symbolize purity, hope, and rebirth. They are also mentioned more than once in most translations of the Bible. So, moving on to the abilities themselves, the word Afflatus comes from Latin meaning to breathe or breathing out. In Christianity, Afflatus is a divine installation of knowledge or power, somewhat like divine inspiration from God. Interestingly enough, the Bible actually describes God physically breathing life into Adam. So let's take a look at these abilities. So once again, they all interact with the lily system, either taking away lilies and charging the blood lily, or using the blood lily once charged. So I guess you can attribute the lilies to being tokens of divine inspiration because all of these abilities require a lily to be used. Afflatus Solace heals a target for a good chunk of health. Considering solace is just comfort or tranquility in a time of struggle, this is pretty fitting. Afflatus Misery does heavy damage to the target. Rather fitting as well, as it's inflicting damage and probably misery onto the enemy. Afflatus Rapture restores your HP and the HP of nearby party members. The word rapture purely defined is a feeling of intense happiness or ecstasy. Rapture in Christian terms is primarily related to the second coming of Christ. There are various interpretations of this because the word rapture is not used in scripture. Different areas of Christianity have different conclusions on how this event will work. There is no universal doctrine for the rapture in Christianity. When discussing the second coming, some state that the faithful will physically ascend to heaven, some state that non-believers will just be erased, some state it will be a massive worldwide event and remembered by everyone, and some believe it will happen in an instant and we won't even notice it. The rapture is still a point of contention within Christianity to this day. In relation to the game, this ability is fitting for the pure definition of the word, but it varies for its Christian interpretation based on which one you're using. Next is Asylum. In-game, it creates a zone that heals party members standing in it and also increases healing effects. An asylum, purely defined, is a place of shelter or refuge. Now, I think we tend to attribute this word to asylums that were used for individuals struggling with psychological health in the past, and it carries a stigma, but that's not really what this word means. In relation to Christianity, it means the same thing as its pure definition. An asylum is a place of refuge, protection, and strength offered to humanity by God in His presence. I think this ability is perfectly named. Next is Assize. Assize deals damage to enemies enemies and heals in an AoE around you. The word Assize has to do with judicial means and the handling of legal affairs and administration of justice. In Christianity, the word is attributed to an interpretation of Judgment Day, referred to as the Great Assize. The Great Assize does not appear in scripture this way, but the Great Assize is the final judgment, and the final decision will be made if you are able to enter God's kingdom. In relation to the game, I think this fits actually. You deal damage to enemies, subjugating them, and heal your party members, blessing them. I think it's actually kind of clever. So I'll give this one 2 paws up for that because I feel like that's what they were going for with this ability. Next is Tetragrammaton. In-game, it is an instant big healing ability, but not as strong as Benediction, and it doesn't do anything else. I honestly feel like the amount of depth to this effect is a little disappointing based on the term they used. Tetragrammaton is referring to the name of God. I don't mean God, I mean what's believed to be God's actual name as it's written in Hebrew, which is this. We say and write this as Yahweh today because Hebrew did not have vowels in its language, so Yahweh is an attempt at transliterating the name for us to read and pronounce as knowledge of the true original pronunciation has been lost. Yahweh is not how God's name was ever originally written. In Judaism today, you will hear Adonai and Elohim. The term Tetragrammaton is literally just describing what you're looking at. Tetra means 4, relating to the 4 letters. So when you say Tetragrammaton in a roundabout way in the English language, what you're really saying is basically 4 letters. Back then, speaking God's name was considered to be an extremely sacred thing, something that you really shouldn't just casually say, so they found ways to talk about God without actually saying his name. In English Bibles today, everywhere that God's name appears, they use the term Lord. This is why Lord is written in all caps in English Bibles. It's a way to connect to the Tetragrammaton by using a word with 4 letters in the place of God's name. To avoid going on for hours, I'll stop here, but for the ability in game, it's sadly a little disappointing for what it's referring to. Next is Divine Benison. It grants a protective barrier to the target. A benison is a prayer for the bestowal of a blessing. Benison and benediction come from the same Latin word. In practice within Christianity, a benison usually refers to a prayer spoken before a meal. Also, historically, the word benison appears earlier than benediction. In relation to the game, this one maybe kind of sort of fits, maybe not really. Definitely doesn't fit as well as benediction though. Next is Plenary Indulgence. In game, this is a setup ability. It grants an effect named Confession to yourself and nearby party members, which triggers additional healing upon the effect of the listed healing abilities. The words Plenary and Indulgence have their own pure definitions, but within Christianity, in Roman Catholicism specifically, a plenary indulgence defined in the Catechism of the Catholic Church is a remission before God of the temporal punishment of sin. When sin is committed, there is a consequence. An indulgence is a removal of the consequence of that sin. How indulgences are granted is different and has historically changed here and there, and additionally has been through controversy in the past. It's a whole thing. Anyway, receiving a plenary indulgence essentially wipes the consequences of all sins you have committed upon receiving it, as plenary means full or all. It's like receiving a presidential pardon for past convictions, and in order to receive this, you must confess to the sins you have made. In relation to the game, I think this ability is well named and pretty clever. It consumes the confession effect and heals you upon receiving another form of healing. I think what could have made this even better is if it also removes status effects as well, but maybe that just would have been way too overpowered. Next is Temperance. In-game, it increases your healing power and reduces damage taken by you and nearby party members. Temperance, purely defined, means self-restraint. This concept is used all over history and various systems, and the word entered Christianity through translations from Greek words into Latin, as temperance comes from Latin roots. Temperance is one of the 4 cardinal virtues alongside prudence, justice, and fortitude, and these were all discussed at at length by the ancient Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle. Roman Emperor Aurelius also talks about temperance in Meditations. In Christianity, temperance is used to talk about resisting the temptations of evil and to show self-restraint to not engage in sinful behavior. As far as the game goes, I guess in a way showing temperance can embolden you and increase your mental will to do better. Maybe that connection works? I think it's an okay term for what it does. And lastly, Liturgy of the Bell. In-game, it's definitely the most wordy ability the White Mage has. In short, it's a heal that goes off when you take damage and heals nearby party members up to 5 times. The word liturgy comes from Greek roots and translated in English essentially means work of the people. In Christianity, a liturgy is public worship, or more specifically, the order of worship. What is called Mass in Catholicism is called Divine Liturgy in Orthodoxy. It is the worship, the assembly, the sermon, the sacraments, the rites, and all of it together. It can also be used to describe something as being liturgical, as in whether an action or prayer can be liturgical or not. If something is not liturgical, then in a way it's not official, and that's not even the best way to describe it either. But in any case, it doesn't mean that it's bad if it's not liturgical. In the same way that pretending to be a toaster is not sinful, you can still do something good that is not necessarily liturgical. As for the bell, well, think of the church bell. It's one of the most recognizable things in Christianity, and every church that could afford one had one in the days before phones and technology. So in-game, the Liturgy of the Bell is a clever construction of 2 Christian aspects together. While it is a cool sounding phrase, its effect is a little mismatched, I think. That was a fun dive into the abilities of the White Mage, and I hope this has been interesting or maybe even helpful information. If you like this video, feel free to leave a like or comment, and even subscribe if you wish to see more in the future. Thank you all for watching, and remember to pet a cat today.